Merry Christmas and welcome to Sam's Smithy. As you can see here, we have a lovely anvil now. So yeah, this was my Christmas gift this year, was this anvil. Very lovely, very nice. And so we are going to be using this instead of the train track, and quite frankly, I'm excited to try this thing out. I've yet to use it. So yeah, let's continue the work we started yesterday on flying out this piece of railroad steel and keep on working. Alright, so right off the bat, one improvement that I noticed with this anvil compared to my train track anvil is exactly how fast the steel moves on it. Like, I totally underestimated how much a real solidly built, well-made anvil can change the speed at which the steel moves when you hit it with a hammer. I'd use way less energy and force just to get the steel to move the same amount as I would have if I hit it really hard over time. I think in this little short bit of maybe about 30 minutes, I did just as much work as it would have taken me with the train track anvil for an hour. So I'm hoping this new setup will help me with making my work go a little faster, but also saving propane, because propane is, I mean, it's pretty cheap, but I prefer not to burn through it as fast as I do, you know. So right here, I'm beginning to try hot cutting again, and I've also noticed that it's hot cutting actually. I don't know if that's a difference with the anvil, or if it's just that it's thin enough that it's hot cutting a little better, but right here is where I'm trying to divide into separate sections, because then I'm going to flatten it out and make it into kind of a bit of a rectangular stock piece of steel. I'm not quite sure what the composition is yet. I'm pretty sure it's tool steel. It would make sense. Maybe it's something like tool steel. I'm not real confident though. It's actually a piece of Carnegie rail is what I'm using right here. I bought it off a guy in the countryside where I bought my train track anvil off. He was selling little sections of anvil for like by the inch. I think it was like $6 an inch or something. It's kind of expensive, but if you wanted a cheap anvil, it was an easy way to get one. Before that though, I used a cast iron anvil, and they're pretty good to just get started. I believe if you go to Harbor Freight, you can get a cast iron anvil, 15 pounds, for about $18. So it's a little over $1 a pound, which is pretty good when it comes to anvils. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, it's pretty economical. Now, is it great? No. It's far from being fantastic. What I want to try doing, though, is see if I could weld a piece of better tool steel on top of the old cast iron anvil, and see if that would make a difference. Kind of like how real anvils are. They're actually chunks of mild steel with some tool steel that's hardened and welded on top. And as you can see in this particular recording, you can see how my anvil is a little chipped on the sides. This anvil is actually from the 1800s, believe it or not. So it has quite some wear. So over time, the hardened steel does chip off. But that's how you know that it's two types of steel put on top of it. So I'd be kind of curious to see if really just one plate of higher quality tool steel would really make that much of a difference on a cast iron anvil. So right here you can see I'm getting really close to getting through with the train track, cut into two sections. This little bottom bit's just going to be a bit of waste. What I'm doing here is I'm cutting with a hacksaw rather than an angle grinder, because the angle grinder blades are a little thick and I didn't want to lose a lot of material. Also, I'm kind of low on angle grinder blades. I need to get some more. I burnt them out trying to cut up my train track anvil. And that pretty much, if you want to burn up a bunch of angle grinder blades or discs, that's a good way to do it. But right here, I'm just kind of bending it back and forth. And what that does is it hardens the steel and actually makes it more brittle to the point where it kind of breaks off at the little crease that I chiseled in with the chisel. That chisel actually is not really meant to be used on steel. It's actually a concrete chisel, but I figured a concrete chisel, a hardened chisel with a point on it, should do the trick. I've seen some people actually use railroad spikes just as themselves, where they have a little bit of a chisel into them. I've seen them use that as hot cutting chisels, just like in place of an actual chisel. The problem is it just bends over real quick, so I feel like you'd have to keep on resharpening and it'd get really blunt really quick. Right here, I'm almost into a nice piece of rectangular stock, or some semblance of a rectangular stock. So what I'm doing in this video is I'm trying to get the tip of the railroad spike to be level and flat. because by itself it kind of slopes down gradually. So I was just trying to get rid of that slope, make it all flat, so that when I hot cut it later, the pit I was cutting would be roughly the same depth. Now, as you see, it's kind of going back to a sloped look, just because it's going to want to bend the metal before it's going to want to push the chisel through, so it's going to bend back slightly over time. But it kind of worked. If you can't tell, I'm not really sure what I'm doing in this whole process. I was just kind of figuring it out as I went. People on Reddit told me that they tried to think of it like a hot dog bun, and so that's what I was trying to do here. I'm trying to chisel out a hot dog bun, but you'll notice pretty soon I'm going to just give up on the whole hot dog bun and just cut a slit into it and just kind of wedge it in between the slit. Right here, though, this is the rectangle from earlier, and I'm just cleaning it up with the grinding disc on the angle grinder, and this should theoretically help the weld stick a little better. I'm not quite sure if it really makes a difference. I've yet to have great success with forge welding, but I've heard some people like it would make sense, I guess, kind of get off the oxide layer, because that's not the stuff you want to weld. You want to weld the steel, not the oxide. But it begs the question, once you stick it back in the forge, won't it just oxidize again? But it's a quick little process I can do. So right here is where I'm following the little bit of a crease I created with the chisel and just really cutting that spike in half. I actually tried forge welding it before cutting this. I'm not showing that video because, as you can expect, it was a failure. But if you notice it's a wire clinging to the side of the spike. That's where I had it wrapped tightly with wire to hold it in place. So I'm just going to split up both the halves here with the concrete chisel. Again, the same chisel I used to hot cut. And this should make it wide enough for me to slide in that piece of rectangle steel that I made earlier. Just tap it in there, get a good snug fit. And the idea is I'm going to hammer it like that. It's going to be kind of like a sandwich more than a hot dog. But when you think about it, a hot dog, it's essentially a sandwich. I'm just getting it all lined up here. It's all about just trying to figure out what works the best. And this is big learning curve involved. This took me all day to figure out how to actually forge weld it. So it's really difficult to find the right temperature that works, especially for propane, which seems kind of weird. It seems like propane would be superior. I've forged with both propane and coal before, and believe it or not, coal is a lot easier. Well, I guess it's not that unexpected. It's a lot easier to forge weld with coal, because I've actually melted blades in my coal forge before, and that's something. Seeing it sparking and like dripping molten steel. I didn't know it could do that, but I've had it happen, so I feel like forge welding might be a little easier with coal, but I like the propane because it lets me do this in the garage instead of far away from the house, away from all the power tools, and I wouldn't really be able to use the angle grinder or the other grinders as easily. I would have to go back and forth, so I do like the propane better for convenience. Also, one part is flux. Now, as you can tell, I'm no expert or really knowledgeable on the whole subject at all, as you can see with the amount I drop it. But I've seen people put borax flux on it, and I know it should chemically alter the melting point of the steel, allowing it to just more quickly melt. So I just put some on liberally, just hoping it would help. So what I'm doing here is I just cut off the little bit. There's a little bit that didn't forge weld and was sticking up above the blade, and I was just cutting that off, trimming it down, getting it flush. But here I'm trying to save some of it that wouldn't weld and hit it back down. I've got half of it welded at this point, but the other half's giving me a little bit of grief, and I think it's because the oxide layer built up. So there is something to grinding down the steel first and getting it nice and cleaned up. I think right here is when I just resorted to full blast. I opened up the propane regulator all the way here and just really let it have it, put a lot of flux on it, and just kind of hope for the best and smack the heck out of it with a hammer, and it seemed to kind of work here. As you can see, it's not a perfect weld. I mean, there's much to be desired with this welding job I'm doing here, and in the finished ground blade I can see a little bit of delamination. Not terrible delamination, but there is some present, and that's to be a little bit concerning, but it seems like there's enough that it keeps up its structural integrity and doesn't really slip apart. So I'm just hoping that it won't fall apart on me. But so far so good. I kind of misjudged though, as you can tell, this actual length this blade would end up to be. That little square piece of steel I welded in between really added quite a bit of length to it, and I'm kind of realizing it now, but hey, long's nice, not necessarily a bad thing. So right here I'm just trying to get the basic shape in there, just kind of getting the drop point forged in. The rest of it I'm going to grind, but I want to have most of it in place so I don't have to grind off so much metal and make so much dust and lose so much. I don't know. I'm kind of funny about wasting steel. I try to use every bit of scrap I have around from other projects. I'm calling this a day. I believe I got a decent amount done here. I mean, got the piece welded on. I will admit, not the greatest weld in the world. But it looks like it's holding up. So far, no terrible delamination as you saw earlier. I experienced a little bit, and I basically just brute forced it back into place, basically turning the regulator on my propane tank all the way open, just letting it have it, put a good bit of flux. But yeah, it's coming along great. I think tomorrow I'm gonna just finish profiling it and just kind of clean it up and get it going, but I'm hoping I can get this done by tomorrow. So stay tuned because it's about to be finished, and boy am I excited.